You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor. Subscribe to the channel. Leave your comments below. Be sure to smash that like button. As we move through this coaching search pertaining to LSU, as there is news, we'll certainly share this news with you. And there is a report today from the Detroit Free Press that Michigan State and Mel Tucker are working on what they call an historic, their word, not mine, an historic $95 million 10-year contract extension for Mel Tucker to remain the coach of the Spartans there in East Lansing. Two prominent boosters apparently have forked over the cash for the money to keep Mel Tucker there in place in East Lansing. So this tells me a couple of things, which if you actually sort of follow the breadcrumbs, this all starts to materialize a little bit now as everyone has sort of tried to put together the pieces of the puzzle as it pertains to LSU's coaching search. I told you several weeks ago, that LSU was floating out a $100 million contract. The terms that I heard, 8 years, $100 million, averages out to about $12 million a year to see what type of inbound interest they would get with that deal. I have no problem at all saying that there are factions at LSU that are very bullish on Mel Tucker and have been bullish on Mel Tucker. I am also convinced that those factions do not include Scott Woodward. Believe that interest largely, and not solely, but largely, was from the president of the university, William Tate. So when you look at Mel Tucker and what's happened here, it's very obvious what's happened. Like, you cover enough or you follow enough of these, you see what happens. Schools seeking a coach make calls, and when other schools learn that school A is snooping around with their coach, they do one of two things. They either say, well, good luck to you, or they give him a pay raise. And that's clearly what's happened here with Mel Tucker. I don't believe that Scott Woodward's interest in Mel Tucker was, I don't want to say sincere, but I want to say that Mel Tucker was never Scott Woodward's target. And Mel Tucker has been very able here, obviously, to use that interest, to leverage that interest into a massive contract. The other thing, as a random aside, I would like to point out is when Jimbo Fisher first left Florida State for Texas A&M and he got a 10-year, $75 million deal, and much of the college football-loving world melted, I sat in this very chair. I'm sure it was this exact chair because it's still the same one that's all jacked up. And I said, this isn't a big deal, number one, because Texas A&M can afford it, and so who cares? Number two, it averages out to $7.5 million a year, and by the time this contract is up, how many more coaches are going to be making over $7 million a year to where it looks like he's getting a deal? A few short years later, now Mel Tucker's getting 10 years, $95 million, as reported by the Detroit Free Press. Anybody going to melt over this? My guess is no. But maybe I've been wrong before. I can be proven wrong again. So that's my takeaway here from the Mel Tucker news. Number one, Tucker leveraged the call from Scott Woodward or whichever faction at LSU, the word that LSU, that I got, that many others got, that LSU was circulating terms around a $100 million contract. And so they ponied up to pay their guy. And number two, Scott Woodward was never really had zoned in on Mel Tucker as his target, because if he had, Mel Tucker would be the LSU coach. If LSU was willing to offer north of $12 million a year, and you could take more money to coach in the SEC at LSU where you can win a championship, whereas you will never win a national championship at Michigan State, yeah, it seems very obvious why. Yes, and I'm biased, as are many of you listening right now, but there's also a very objective element to LSU against Michigan State. One has won 3 national titles and played for a 4th since 2003. The other is Michigan State. So there are very obvious differences between the two programs. What becomes very interesting now is you can sort of play the game of sort of process of elimination, right? Where if you are to believe Jimbo Fisher on Monday, and I've told you before I believe Jimbo. When he says he wants to be at A&M and he has no intention to leave, I do believe him. Now, I've told you before, I also believe Scott Woodward will keep calling. If you now scratch Mel Tucker, and I assume we all are at the place where we've agreed we can scratch James Franklin. My understanding from people at Penn State is that weeks ago they begun working on a contract extension to keep James Franklin there. If he were to leave, it would be for SC, but I also am to understand that SC is sort of focused their attention on Luke Fickell. I don't know if they can get that deal done, but you can start to eliminate names, right? And so others then come sort of into focus. And one of them is Lincoln Riley, and that just will not seemingly go away. We played for you. Can you pull up the Lincoln Riley audio from yesterday, please? Just very quickly, thank you. If you missed this, remember, Monday, Jimbo Fisher, 90-second adamant denial. Well, it was a non-denial denial, but it was a strong non-denial denial. This was the quintessential non-denial denial from Lincoln Riley when asked about LSU.
It's nothing to handle, I mean, it's pretty easy. I coach the University of Oklahoma football team, and you guys know me. You know how I feel about this place and this program. So we've all been down this road many times before. You guys know where I stand on that, and that hadn't changed.
So that was Lincoln Riley, non-denial denial. You all know how I feel about this place, how I stand, where I stand, blah, blah. Okay, didn't really say anything. Well, Tom Luginbill went on a show called The Next Round. Forgive me, I'm not familiar, but I did see this via YouTube. Here's what Tom Luginbill said when the guys asked him specifically about what's going on at Oklahoma, and his comments dovetailed into conversations about Lincoln Riley and LSU.
So if it's a sense in Oklahoma that maybe Caleb Williams started reading his own press, he think it was easy because he had a pretty good run there for a couple of games, and that can happen to young players. The bottom line is he can mask some of their weaknesses, and it's not all him, but they're still not a very good team up front in the offensive line. Aside from him, they're not a great team running the football. He's actually what's helped mask that the most because he could do something that Spencer Rattler couldn't do. I think the thing that stood out to me, and listen, I'm not saying I know anything specific, but I would not be surprised. Something's going on at Oklahoma, and I would not be surprised one bit if the next head coach at LSU is Lincoln Riley.
So that was Tom Luginbill. On The Next Round, which is on YouTube if you want to search it, The Next Round on YouTube from November 16th. So, again, more and more smoke starts billowing. I don't mind telling you that I have had conversations with people in NFL circles that have suggested in absolute terms that Lincoln Riley is going to be courted by at least 2 NFL teams. That should come as no surprise. Seemingly that conversation happens every year. What does he want to do? I believe Lincoln Riley is going to have the opportunity to say yes to LSU. Also have the opportunity, if he wants, to say yes to the NFL or to stay at Oklahoma. But that would make a lot of sense as to where LSU's search and attention would now be focused. And if it's a no from Lincoln Riley, then you start to sift into the who might be next. And maybe that's where this ultimately will lead. But I still maintain that come 2 weeks from today, we should know who LSU's coach is. By the middle of the week after LSU plays Texas A&M, we should know who LSU's next coach will be. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.